Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Welcome to the ScholarCAST presented by the National Society of Collegiate Scholars, 8 Lasting Legacies of the Millennial Generation and What It Means for You, Gen Z, with world-renowned marketing and media expert and best-selling author, Matt Britton. My name is Stephen Mandarano. I'm here with the national office here at NSCS, and we're excited that you're able to join us. As high-achieving collegiate scholars, we understand that content counts, and more importantly, content with actionable takeaways that you can apply personally, academically, into your future professional career paths. Before we get started, I'd like to better understand more about you. Today, we've invited both current NSCS scholars and some nominated scholars. So we're going to pop a poll across the screen real quick, and if you can answer it, that would be great. And you should see the poll on your screen right now. Again, we'll leave it up for a few more seconds. If you could answer it, that'd be great. Are you a current NSCS scholar or invited guest or prospect? Excellent. Thank you for doing that for us. Now, a few housekeeping items. All attendees are muted and in listen-only mode. The chat feature is visible to all attendees, so please be mindful of that. Today's presenter will share his Twitter handle, so you can ask questions through that. And if there's time at the end, we will invite participants to write in questions. Today's presentation will be recorded and shared. And do not forget to join us for part 2 with Matt Britton, entitled How to Leverage Millennial Disruptions to be a Disruptor, next Wednesday, May 23rd at 3:30 Eastern. I will now hand it over to today's presenter, Matt Britton, a leading professional author, speaker, and generational guru. Without further ado, I'm going to hand off the screen to Matt, and he will present.
Okay, everyone, thank you, and thank you for that great introduction. It's really great to be speaking with such a distinguished audience. I wasn't not a distinguished scholar, college student, or student at all myself, but you know, I've run into many intellects in my life, and I've learned from them just like they've learned from me, and hopefully I can add you guys a lot of value today. I've spent my whole career helping big brands target teens and college students. I started an agency in 2002 called Mr. Youth, which became MRY, which launched some of the first ever social media marketing campaigns for big brands. And over the last 20 years, I've worked with CMOs, which take up about half the Fortune 500. So quite a lot of experience in kind of understanding what big businesses are looking for. And if I had to kind of sum it up into one major point on what I found is that big businesses are disconnected. Millennials, which I know make up a lot of the people in this audience right now, have not filled the C-suite of major corporations yet. Gen Xers, baby boomers are still the ones making major business decisions. And I think that's an issue for big businesses. And frankly, one reason why you see the Toys R Us's and Blockbusters of the world. And the reason why is that millennials were the first generation to ever grow up with the internet in the household. For many of you on the phone who are millennials, it's something that you might take for granted. But for Gen Xers and boomers, like myself, being a Gen Xer, who did not grow up with the internet in the household, who did not have access to information and real-time communication with friends the way that you all did, your brains are really wired differently than the rest of the world. And I think that creates a massive opportunity for you, which we're going to be talking about during next week's session, because intuitively you have an understanding of things that the rest of the business world doesn't. So what I'm going to be talking about today is what are those real major fundamental differences that the millennial generation have brought to society and have brought to the business world. What are the things that are as a result of a hugely influential generation growing up with the internet and the household have imparted on society that will make the world different forever? I think it's important for this to be contextualized to this audience because the world is truly at your fingertips right now. There are so many businesses that really are living in a 1995 world and are operating in a 1995 world here in 2018, and there's really no sign of them changing. And the reason why there's really no sign of them changing is they are, simply out of touch with where the world is today. So I'm going to go through these 8 major trends. As mentioned earlier, I have my Twitter handle on every slide, which is at MattyB, M-A-T-T-Y-B. So if you have questions or thoughts, either during the presentation or afterwards, you want to follow up with me, seriously, feel free at any time. Would love to add value in any way I can. So I'm going to dive into it. And again, thanks so much for taking time on a busy Friday to be here with me. And I'll do everything I can to make sure it's definitely worth your time. So unlike myself, a Gen Xer, and boomers and every generation before us, we were born staring into our mother's loving eyes. But, ironically, today, the kids that are born and babies that are being born right now, one of the first things that they're going to stare into is a cell phone screen. And that itself shows you how early and how embryonic of a stage it is that young people really have their brains wired differently as they're staring in the screen, sometimes within minutes of them actually being on this earth. And then we all know the stories of 3, 4, 5-year-old kids, trying to crawl out of the womb, and the first thing they're trying to do is become an influencer. They go up to TV screens and obviously you try to swipe them. And then, when they're age 10, 11, 12, they're having group status meetings as they're sharing, information with themselves in the cloud on a multitude of devices. So this is the new generation. Kids that you're looking at on the screen are going to be the future business leaders. But again, we are so far away from that point right now. And the insight I've come to learn over time as a result of this is that kids are growing up quickly. For all the reasons I just spoke about, the access to information that they have, kids are growing up faster than ever before. But at the same time, there's a dynamic that's going on that adults are growing up slowly. Since older people 40, 50 years old, have the opportunity to be so in touch with what younger consumers, 20, 25-year-olds are doing, it gives them the access and understanding of how to live younger at later ages, which is why it's socially acceptable now to have 50-year-olds at Burning Man, so to speak. And I think that's a major consumer trend in that people are growing up faster and growing up older, and there's a sweet spot somewhere in between, probably around 25, 27 years old, where all consumers are kind of striving towards. And if you can create a business that can really target that stage of life, you really have wide-ranging implications across really consumers of all ages. The first major trend that I talk about often when I go and do speaking tours around the world that millennials have left in terms of an indelible impact on society is something that I call the status update is the new status symbol. The status update is a new status symbol. If you think about it, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, people represented to society and built their personal brands through the cars, houses, watches, and sneakers that they adorned. It was the logos and the stuff they bought that signaled to society who they were. If you think about it, before Instagram, if you had an amazing experience, like you were front row of a game or you climbed to the top of Machu Picchu and you want to show it to people, the only people who could see it were the people who could actually look at your photo album in front of yourself. Experiences were not able to be used as social currency to build your personal brand. But obviously now, in this generation, it is. And it creates a whole new phenomenon that I talked about in my book, Youth Nation, called DIFTY, which stands for Did It for the Instagram. Experiences are now becoming so important in people building their personal brands, in the jobs that they get, and the relationships that they can access, and their friendships and their peer sets, that people are now pursuing experiences, in some cases, not so much to enjoy them, but to prove to everyone that they were there. This is Mission Peak in Fremont, California, and obviously it's been around for a very long time because it's a mountain. But in the last 3 to 4 years, Mission Peak has been getting complaints from local visitors in Fremont, California, where it's located. There's been pollution and lack of parking. So many people want to climb this mountain peak. The reason why is a couple reasons. Why this mountain looks like these 3 women climbed the top of Mount Everest is just a short 15-minute, 20-minute walk up a hill. It's conveniently located next to 2 major highways, and perhaps most importantly, there's a pole on the top that creates the perfect selfie opportunity. Now everybody wants to be a hiker. Everybody's outdoorsy and rugged because what this picture that these 3 women are taking shares and represents to other people is that they have an active, healthy, almost adventurous lifestyle. And whether that's not the case or not, this becomes a core reason and motivator why people will climb up this mountain, which is why the popularity of hiking has grown so much. And it's not even actually for the hiking, it's really for the experience. And it sounds crazy, but if you think about it, why did people ever want to get Rolexes or Platinum American Express cards when it did the same thing as gold cards? It's because it was a status symbol. And now this is just the newest incarnation. You know, you have people in Russia renting grounded private jets to take Instagram photos. These are private jets that never obviously leave the runway. People are doing it because they want to showcase to others, obviously in a very inauthentic way in this regard, you know, that they're living a life of affluence. And then there's Black Tap, a restaurant chain location not too far from where I live in Brooklyn. This one is in Tribeca that sells $25 sundaes that look like this. And, you know, these sundaes create the perfect Instagrammable moment for restaurants. If you're a restaurant and you want to do incredibly well, as Black Tap has, create something that's shareable. And these sundaes are shareable, and because they're shareable, people wait in line to eat them, but really they're waiting in line to take a picture of them. And that's why Black Tap is expanding at a rapid pace, because they understand that shareability is now a core reason why people are going to actually leave the house. There's a museum of ice cream, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, which is now in New York and San Francisco and LA. And when they call themselves a museum, that's almost even a stretch, because when you go to the Museum of Ice Cream, you don't learn about how ice cream is created or the history of ice cream. It's 8 rooms that allow you to take incredible selfies to actually share. These tickets sell out instantly, while, you know, the Tate Modern and the Museum of Natural History in New York and you name it, they are nowhere near as popular with younger people. And I don't think this is a fad. I don't think this is something that is a moment in time. I actually think moving forward for a younger generation, if they're going to be spending their time doing something, it's going to be for a shareable experience. At the same time, all the content that they could access at Museum of Natural History, people can now access on their phones. So this is one example of how museums themselves are going to be completely disrupted. And all of this is creating, you know, a global hospitality renaissance. You have apps like GTFO, which stands for Get the Flight Out, which is in Europe, that allows you to fly anywhere in the world for the cheapest amount of money. So you'll go on a Friday and say, where's the farthest place we can go for the cheapest amount of money, and people are actually going to want to go there so they can get that Instagrammable moment. And as we know, when people travel internationally, they're not looking at a photo's travel book to see where they're going to go. They're going to see who are the influential people, where do they go, where do they take pictures, you know, looking it up on Instagram, and that's what's going to dictate where people actually travel. Obviously, the festival business, we're heading into this summer now, is massive. This is the Glastonbury Music Festival in Europe, but it's not just in Europe, obviously. There's the EDC Festival that's taking place this weekend in Las Vegas. That's going to have more people visit it this weekend than went to Woodstock, which is a generational event. So it just shows how important experiences are, and how, while some people say technology is tearing people apart, in reality, as a result of this, it's actually bringing people closer together. Experiences are also changing the way that people exercise and pursue fitness. This is Tough Mudder, which is now a massively growing phenomenon, where people spend $300 plus to climb through dirty, freezing cold water or under barbed wire so they can pretend like they're a Navy SEAL. You know, this is doing incredibly well, like, while traditional gyms like Bally's Total Fitness is now bankrupt. The reason why is people are pursuing this, obviously, because it's an amazing experience, but also it gives them an opportunity to create content to show their peers, you know, what they're about. In this case, it's being obviously very rugged. Another major trend that I'm seeing with the millennial generation that has really reverberating impacts on business and society in large is this notion of urbanization. You know, the Gen X and baby boomer version of the American dream was moving to the suburbs shortly after you get married and getting that white picket fence, 2-car garage, 1.7 children lifestyle. And now, actually, the version of American dream has taken quite a U-turn. It's cities where many of the millennial generation, certainly Gen Z moving forward, this is the new venue that people consider making a life for themselves. The schools are becoming better. The parks are becoming more voluminous in cities, and the cities are becoming safer overall. And as a result, cities have become the place that people imagine living for themselves, which is changing the footprint in America. This is Washington, D.C. You see the light blue is primarily the working class. You do not see the working class right now, or any much light blue, if any, in this chart. That is because the notion of the inner city blue-collar worker is now being pushed far out of city limits as a result of massive gentrification. obviously the real estate prices have a lot to do with it. In Brooklyn, where I live, real estate costs in the last 10 years are up over 100%, while in the neighboring suburbs are up 3 to 5%. And it's not just Brooklyn outside New York, it's Oakland outside of San Francisco, it's Wynwood inside of Miami, et cetera, et cetera. You name it a US city and I'll show you where the livable boundaries, especially on the coast, are being pushed outwards and outwards because millennials simply do not want to leave. And this is creating major pressure on consumer segments. Businesses that have long enjoyed the traditional consumer lifestyle are now being severely disrupted as a result of consumers staying in cities. Let's take cars, a place where consumers have traditionally spent a ton of their discretionary expenditures. Well, many younger consumers who are staying in cities simply just don't find the need to ever own a car. When you look at the cost of owning a car when combined with gas, tolls, and parking and insurance, when compared against the ease and ubiquity of a tool like Uber, many young people are basically saying, what's the point? Why would I ever need to own a car? Which is obviously putting a lot of pressure on automobile manufacturers. And then obviously homes. As real estate prices go up and up, when younger people move into cities, although they want to stay there, most of them can't afford to buy there. And as a result, a lot of them are tapping into tools like Airbnb to monetize their rented apartment when they're traveling, using other people's tools on Airbnb to actually stay there when they are traveling. And homes and cars, the two places where consumers have spent the most amount of their discretionary expenditure, are now no longer the rite of passage that they obviously used to be. Retail in general, obviously, to no surprise to anyone on this phone, I'm sure, has a ton of pressure on it right now. As more and more consumers stay in cities, shopping malls, for instance, now have trees growing into them as they kind of become abandoned ghost towns. Now, that's obviously not the case everywhere, and there's still plenty of affluent suburban areas across America, but this is a trend that I think you're going to see continue as wealthier millennial consumers continually decide to stay in cities longer and longer. At the same time, they're pushing off getting married for longer, pushing off having children for longer. Again, that whole notion of growing old slower really is a big impact on this as well. And this is generating massive opportunity for the service sector. New business models are popping up right now that has tremendous positive impact on new business models. Glam Squad, for instance, which is a service that allows women to have hair and makeup done at their own homes without ever having to leave their apartments, is doing incredibly well right now. You think about traditional salons and beauty-oriented services, which traditionally have had to have physical retail places on Main Street. Well, those business models really no longer hold anymore as real estate prices go up. At the same time, it's incredibly convenient for a consumer to just hit a button and have these services come to them. There's a tool called Handy that has on-demand cleaning services, Zeal on-demand massage services. I see all these services continuing to grow because in a highly condensed and dense urban area, it just provides so much convenience for the consumer. Then there's Rent the Runway, which obviously is emblematic of the access over ownership trend, which is also a huge impact of the millennial generation. As you know, Rent the Runway allows consumers to rent high-end clothing, in this case dresses, for $75 or $100 an evening when the dress really could cost $1,000. You can wear it out for the night, take the Instagram of it, share it. No one needs to know that you actually don't even own it. And this obviously has tremendous upside as well as disruption for the apparel category. To think 5-10 years ago that women would be renting high-end clothing, a lot of people would have said you're crazy, but it makes sense actually when you think about it. Most women will tell you if they wear a new dress and they share it on Instagram, they're hesitant to wear it for a very long time because everyone's seen them wearing it. Well, now that doesn't exist anymore as a problem because you can rent it, you can return it the next day, and next time you want to go out and wear something fancy, you could just rent another dress. So it creates a lot of opportunity, and I think access over ownership obviously is the case with music with tools like Spotify, obviously in homes like cases like Airbnb. It's really something that I see continuing over time, both creating opportunity and disruption. And urbanization is also transforming the fabric of the global workforce. When I was growing up, a Gen Xer, it was always be a doctor, be a lawyer, work for a big company, and work your way up to the C-suite. But now the reality is the average age of a company in the Fortune 500 is less than 10 years old, meaning that companies aren't around as long as they used to be. That tried and true path of working for the big blue chip companies isn't really a tried and true path anymore. And in its wake is coming this free agent or freelancer movement. WeWork, which is a company obviously that rents out desks for freelancers and independent contractors, was just valued at $20 billion. And WeWork creates, shared collaborative workspaces in high density, affluent urban areas across the country and around the world. And you can rent a desk for $200 a month and be in a culture that rivals Google and be surrounded by people in all different types of industries. And as long as you have a marketable skill set, whether it's deep into an art, whether you're a graphic designer or you're a copywriter or you're just a creative, or deep into a science, whether you're a coder, a Ruby on Rails developer, an AI engineer. So these very deep skill sets, you really have limitless opportunities to really succeed in this new world and this new economy. It's the people in the middle, who are focused on middle management and liberal arts and being a jack of all trades and master of none, that I think are really going to find themselves on the wrong end of disruption in this economy, because a lot of those jobs are being outsourced. But if you are deep into an art and deep into a science, and you can set yourself up in a WeWork and find a way to really build your personal brand, well, then that's a whole different path. And that's something that a lot of people are really realizing they can pursue. And big companies are really following suit. They're moving from these large suburban enclaves like Pepsi in Purchase, New York, or Microsoft in Redmond, Washington, into major cities where they can kind of attract that millennial talent. Because as millennials are staying in cities, many of them do not want to do the reverse commute. They don't want to work for companies unless they can be in major cities. So now it's impacting the way that major companies look at their future and their real estate strategy. Another millennial legacy that, again, it both creates disruption and opportunity is the notion of the barbell economy. For the first time since the roaring 20s, 0.1% of the population in the United States controls nearly 20% of the wealth, meaning that there's tremendous opportunity on the luxury side of the equation, and also, unfortunately for most, a lot of opportunity on the value side of the equation. But in the middle, well, in the middle, that's the last place you want to be. To illustrate how much opportunity there is, you only have to look at the 8 richest men in the world who control as much wealth as the poorest 50% of the people in the world, which is staggering, obviously a huge social problem at the same time. But from a business perspective, it's something that you really can't ignore. And it's something you really need to take a step back and say, wow, this is something that I really need to understand when I'm going to market. Am I going to be a luxury brand or a value brand? Am I going to be a value brand like Dollar Tree, Dollar Store, Dollar General, like Vizio that sells flat screens for $199, winning through supply chain innovation, providing the best possible product for the lowest possible price? Or am I going to win on the luxury side of the equation, like JetSmarter, which is a startup that offers people, a private jet rental service for $15,000 where you can jump on charters to major cities. Private jets actually do take off the runway. There's Aman Resorts selling rooms for $2,000 a night. There's the iPhone itself, the iPhone X, which was, $1,000. So on the luxury side, there's a ton of opportunity. But who's struggling? Brands in the middle, like The Gap. The Gap just announced they're closing 40% of their stores. And if you think about it, it makes sense because the value side is buying Lee jeans at Walmart for $25. The luxury side's buying AG brand jeans at boutique stores or J brand jeans for $200. And nobody's buying $75 or $100 jeans anymore, which is what The Gap sells. So The Gap is in the middle. And there are so many businesses, whether it be airlines or hotels or automobiles, you name it, that find themselves in the middle right now. And if you're in the middle, it's the last place that you want to be. And you really need to pick a side as a business because that's where all the growth is and that's where all the opportunity is. And unfortunately, this barbell economy, I only think is going to accelerate moving forward due to a variety of factors. Obviously, Amazon is a massive millennial legacy. What Amazon represents and their impact on society, I believe they're going to be closer to a $2 trillion company than a $1 trillion company by the end of this year, even though they haven't even reached $1 trillion in value yet, just because of the growing momentum they have with the consumer, especially with that urban millennial consumer who needs that convenience of being able to have everything delivered. Think about it. They don't have a car. They're not going to drive to a Target or Walmart and load up the back of their SUVs anymore. This is their new way to buy, and in a growing amount of categories. That's why you see luxury doorman buildings in major cities where you can't see the walls anymore because the Amazon boxes are stacking up so high. And Amazon is using this dominance to put pressure on low involvement categories. It used to be if you were a Procter & Gamble, or you were a Unilever or Kraft, or Coca-Cola or Pepsi, if you went down to Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas and got a little bit more shelf space, well, then you were going to have a great year because that's where everybody bought everything. And you didn't really need to understand your consumer. But now, as more and more consumers, as evidenced by Amazon's recent acquisition of Whole Foods, buy groceries online, that great meeting and doing a lot of business with Walmart, well, that's simply not enough anymore. And on the same token, Walmart itself is now creating their own private label brands like Great Value to actually go against products themselves. So, less consumers are buying a lot of these products, especially on the luxury side, in big box retailers. At the same time, the big box retailers themselves are competing, which is going to be to put a ton of pressure on some of the biggest companies in the world. All of these companies have traditionally relied on having distribution through big box retailers. As well, all of these companies don't have much customer data. They don't know their consumer because they've never had to in the past. All they had to know is how to get their products in Walmart or Target or Kroger or Costco. And if they did that, their products would move off the shelf. But that simply isn't the case anymore. And consumers at the same time care less and less about brands. This is a study by a company called Brand Finance that listed the most valuable brands of 2017. And what you don't see on this list is a Hershey's or a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola or a Nike. Right? Or an Oreo. So like those tried and true classic American brands are really nowhere to be found here. No Ford, right? No General Motors, no Mercedes. And the reason why is that consumers really right now seem to be caring only about brands to the extent that they are a utility in somebody's lives. They are making consumers' lives easier. They're not making a brand promise that you will feel more athletic by wearing these shoes, right? Or you'll feel more happy by drinking this soda. Those brand promises, while they're still being pushed by major brands, is not really what consumers care about as much anymore. They care about how are their lives going to become easier. What do they care about when they wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning? And how can these brands deliver on what they care about? So this is forcing a whole new wave of innovation in packaged goods. Many companies using platforms like Shopify to sell direct. Selling direct is obviously a very lucrative business model. The issue is with Amazon and Amazon Prime, for a lot of businesses, that doesn't work. For some it does though, like Warby Parker, which obviously has had a tremendous impact on the eyewear space, taking on the 800-pound gorilla in Luxottica. They've created a tremendous digital footprint, and on top of it, a retail footprint in high-density urban areas, as well as been super innovative by giving utilities to consumers, like the ability to virtually try on glasses with the new iPhone depth sensor. So they understand creating utility for consumers, creating that direct relationship. There's a company called Brandless, a startup that just raised $50 million that basically is saying, you're right, Matt, consumers don't care about brands really at all. They care about what the brands can do for them. So we're going to sell products that have no brands on them. And everyone's going to be $3, and they're all going to have the best possible ingredients that we can put in it for $3, and that's it. And I think for low involvement categories, for maple syrup and for shampoo and detergent and you name it, I think this is going to have a major impact. And then there's companies that are going direct and saying, we're going to come up with a unique utility, like this company Away that sells luggage for $200, started by two women in their late 20s that has iPhone chargers in them. Right, that one piece of utility that can differentiate them from a company like Tumi or Samsonite in their space, and they were able to identify that insight, understood their consumer, created a direct relationship, not relying on Amazon. So it's either figure out how to cater to one of the barbell businesses on Amazon, or create a direct relationship with some type of niche centered in utility. But those seem to be really the only business strategies right now that tend to be working for consumers. Another major impact, which is frankly probably going to be much more of a Gen Z impact than a Gen Y or Millennial impact, is voice. Voice technology is continuing to grow in importance and usage and utility by this younger generation. Alexa through Amazon, or Cortana through Microsoft, or Home through Google, or Siri through Apple, the biggest companies in the world are investing in voice technology for a reason. Why I believe voice is going to be the new way that consumers enter information is that voice doesn't really rely on consumers to change their habit. We all talk too much. We're not asking consumers to wear crazy VR glasses by using voice. We're not asking them to do anything outside of the bounds of what they do every day. We're saving them time, and we're making their lives easier. I made an argument a couple of years ago that I don't think they should be teaching handwriting in school anymore, because there's not going to be many use cases for handwriting 10 to 15 years from now. And I would argue moving forward, maybe typing isn't going to be taught as much in schools anymore. Now, obviously, there's a lot of use cases, whether you're on a subway or you're in a crowded office, where everyone's going to be talking into their phone. But there's also a lot of use cases where I think voice is going to replace typing as a new input into mobile devices. And what a company like Amazon is doing is they're leaning into all this. They're saying, yes, consumers are going to adopt voice, so we're going to provide these low price Amazon Alexa dots for $50 and discount them during certain times of year, even the $30 in people's homes. And we're going to bet that voice is so important, and the utility of not even having to pick up your phone and to order a product is so valuable to their consumer, it's actually going to outweigh the value of a traditional brand. And a good example is if you try to right now order batteries on Amazon Alexa, the only thing Amazon Alexa will allow you to order in terms of batteries is their Amazon Basics batteries, which is their own brand of batteries, which they obviously make a lot of margin on. You can't order Duracell or Energizer batteries over Alexa. What Amazon is betting through this is that the ease and ubiquity of ordering through your voice-based device like Alexa outweighs the power and the brand equity of a multi-billion-dollar brand like Duracell. And that kind of feeds into everything. What I've been saying is utility is really all that matters right now. And for so many brands, especially, again, these low involvement categories, which make up a big portion of the spending in the economy in the US, again, whether it be soap or shampoo or toothpaste or batteries or detergent or milk, right? None of these things matter in terms of the brands anymore the way they used to. And the impact on industries is really massive in that regard. I also believe that the very nature of mobile devices are going to soon transform. I don't think consumers are going to be walking around staring at phones the way that they used to in the past. I think that the notion of mobile devices is going to change. I think the AirPods are really the first indication of that. AirPods are basically mini computers that people have in their ears right now. And as voice becomes more ubiquitous as a way to input information into a mobile device, well then in a lot of instances you can walk out of your house with just the AirPods and you can send text messages and you can search and you can do a lot of the things that you do on your phone right now without ever having to type in anything or look at anything. I do think there's going to be a world where you're going to have wearables on your eyes. I don't think glasses are it. I think it's probably contact lenses. But if you had contact lenses, this is from a movie, Her, that I would recommend all you guys watch if you haven't yet, because I think it does a really interesting job at painting the future of what a world looks like when people really are really one with their devices, if you will. But I think if you think about contact lenses and the augmented reality device, augmented reality meaning it's a mix of virtual reality and reality. I think contact lenses are a great use case. So to explain it in a little bit more of a practical way, say you are at a store and you want to know how much something costs, you could say, hey Siri, how much does this cost? And it will simply overlay the price over the product you're looking at. Or hey Siri, tell me who I have in common with this person who I see on the street. Or hey Alexa, tell me that, and then your contact lenses will overlay that information. Or how fast am I driving right now? So those are use cases where I think augmented reality work. And if you had these contact lenses that can overlay a screen, I know it's a little Minority Report-esque, but to think that the iPhone itself is only 10 years old, and think how much technology has accelerated in the last 10 years. If you look at it through that lens, then 10 years from now, who knows where we're going to be, because technology is only accelerating in terms of its rate of change and its rate of impact. So, change is going to happen much more quickly, I think, than people think in a lot of these areas. And I think voice is one of them. And that threatens a company like Google, because Google, despite the fact that they tried to buy Motorola and despite the fact that they do have the Android operating system, does not own a physical device that is in consumers' hands at scale. And controlling the last mile is incredibly important. That's why Amazon is really pushing to have devices infiltrate it. They tried with their phone, that didn't really work, but they're trying to get the devices in people's homes, which makes sense because that's where a lot of people are ordering stuff that you buy on Amazon. And if I search for a pizza place, well, if I ask Siri, well, then it's Apple that owns search, right? And Apple could use Google's technology, but it's going to come at a big cost to Google, a bigger cost than ever before. So I think a company like Google, out of all the big tech companies, I think really has a lot to figure out in that area. I think another big millennial legacy that hasn't really taken hold yet in a massive way, but will very soon, is this notion of the TV becoming a giant iPad hanging on your wall. Young kids, when they're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, they go up to televisions and they try to swipe the TV because they think you should be able to. They have no idea what a TV network even is. You ask them what Fox is and they'll tell you it's an animal. You ask them what ABC is, they'll tell you it's the alphabet. Yet the majority of advertisers are putting 60, 70, 80% of their budget into major TV networks of which young people don't even know what it is. So I think we're going to be entering a world soon where the TV and the computer become one. The TV, the television that is in all of our homes, will be touchscreen and programmatic, and your TV is going to know who you are. And obviously, we're kind of there now, right? There's Apple TV, there's there's smart TVs, but it hasn't really come together as one device yet. I think it will once Apple really gets traction with a television that they just announced that they're going to be rolling out. And of course, Amazon's doing the same thing, right? They both want to, those are two companies that are doing the best in terms of proliferating physical devices in people's hands. Microsoft tried with Windows Phone. It didn't really work. We mentioned that Google really tried. They weren't able to do so. So every company, all the big ones, have tried, except for Facebook, which is more of a data company, and I'll get into. But it's really Apple first, and then Amazon, who's really focused lately on proliferating these devices, which I think is hugely impactful. And this is going to create havoc in the media and advertising industry with some major changes. Right now, this is what the Apple TV looks like, right? There's major TV networks. Moving forward, I think TV networks are going to go away. And I think people are going to tune into the same thing that the Gen Z kids are tuning into today, which is other people. The Kevin Hart channel, right? The Jake Paul channel. Like, these influencers now are creating their own content, as well as traditional celebrities, whether it be Selena Gomez or Beyonce. They're the ones that have their own networks. Individuals like Selena Gomez have much bigger reach than TV networks right now through social media. So why wouldn't they have their own platform? I think shows, whether it be Game of Thrones or Billions, they're going to basically completely circumvent networks and just have their own app. And they're going to sell their show directly to consumers or subsidize it through advertising. And then major sports leagues. I mean, the NFL right now is by far the biggest force in traditional American media. It's the most watched program on linear television. Excuse me, across both male and female viewers, which is why they have 4 multi-billion-dollar deals with networks right now, because they know that's the only thing that gets consumers actually watch TV commercials. So I think in this world, what's really fascinating to me is that a consumer will have 2 choices, during the show Billions. Do they want to pay for it, right? Do you want to pay $2 an episode, or do you want to watch it for free and get subjected to TV spots? But in the world of a barbell economy, does that only mean the value side is going to be CTV spots? Because the luxury side will just pay to watch the show and skip that. So what does that mean for television advertising, which is where all the advertising dollars go to? So, like, to take a step back, I mean, think about the things that I've said during this conversation so far. Cars, the main thing that consumers buy, out of their pocket, besides real estate, both those things, they might not be buying as much anymore. Clothing, they might not be buying as much anymore. Yes, they're going to be buying toothpaste and shampoo and things like that, but those brands actually matter less. The places they're going to work is going to change. Where they're going to live is going to change. We are entering a different world right now. And again, this is a world that a lot of businesses are not really set up for. Some other points is companies like Facebook. I mentioned Facebook earlier. I think Facebook is best positioned to take advantage of this whole shift in media, not just Facebook, because a lot of people will say, well, younger people don't use Facebook anymore. But the reality is Facebook is a company. It's not just a destination. And there's plenty of younger people, Gen Z kids on obviously Messenger and obviously Instagram. And there's over 1 billion people on WhatsApp around the world. So if you think about that, I mean, the amount of reach that they have really gives them more data than anybody else. So when I'm logged into my TV and if I see an ad, and if Ford wants to target people who own a Ford whose lease is ending in 6 months, it's going to be Facebook that feeds that information. So I think one day Facebook's going to be powering and all the data behind every television ad that happens, regardless of where it is, which is where I think their prospects is moving forward. So those are my main points in terms of where the world is headed moving forward. I guess what I'll say in summary, and this is going to be went into detail in a lot more depth during the next call, is that a lot of these things I talked about during this call are things to you that if you're a millennial, that you're probably saying, yeah, of course, yeah, of course, yeah, of course, when you put it out there. But when you're living life on an everyday basis and you're looking at a new job or you're looking at a business opportunity, the yeah, of course to you, to most other people who are in power positions in business right now is, I don't even know these things exist. I don't think of things this way. This isn't my world. And they are simply not moving fast enough to disrupt their own businesses and change. And I think so many of the large companies in the United States right now that were around in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and that are being run by people who aren't of the millennial mindset are going to be no longer. And they could even be companies that are doing well right now. But moving forward, as these trends continue, and make no mistake, they will continue, I think you're going to end up seeing massive disruption in so many categories. And as I said at the onset, I really do believe as a result, the world is really at your fingertips in terms of what you're able to achieve growing up in this generation and really being entrepreneurial minded and open-minded about the possibilities that exist. So I think we were going to turn it over to questions, or otherwise I can answer via Twitter as you send them to me. Either way, whatever's easiest. But
Great,
thank
Matt.
you very much. Yes, go
Great,
on.
thank you so much. Let's try to see
Absolutely.
if anyone has a few questions right now. If you have any questions, please go to the right-hand side of your screen, click on the questions box, and type it in. We'll just give it a few minutes. Otherwise, we'll let people find
I
you
did get
on
a question
Twitter.
over Twitter about Bitcoin and what I think about cryptocurrency. My take is, first of all, the underlying technology of blockchain, I definitely believe in. I think blockchain is going to be something that is going to transform and change a ton of businesses, how products are authenticated. And I think Bitcoin and cryptocurrency more generally, there will be a role for, although I think the government is going to have more to do with the future of cryptocurrency than a lot of us would like to believe, because the thing about money is that the government likes to know who has it and how it's being spent, and whether it be for tax reasons or crime reasons. They really want to get a handle on it. So I think as it gets bigger and bigger, I do think government intervention is going to take over. And I actually think that's the case with most technology, even existing companies. I think Amazon, Facebook, especially with the recent scandals with the election and the Russia hacking, et cetera, regardless of what you believe, I think that it's now on everybody's radar. And I think that's going to change the future of technology in its current state. I think it's going to be far more regulated moving forward, for better or for worse.
Great. And someone just asked, what is the name of your book again?
The name of my book is Youth Nation, YOUTH Nation, NATION. Also, in fact, it's right here. And my website's on here as well, mattbritton.com. So you could check me out. I have a ton of content up there in terms of longer presentations and all different categories if you want to learn more as well.
Great. And just again, final call out for anybody if you have any questions. You can click on the right-hand side of the screen, type in your question. And of course, you can find Matt on Twitter. Let me just go through this one more time to see. We have a question. Any thoughts on how net neutrality is affecting businesses and how consumers are buying or picking their products and services?
Well, net neutrality actually, it was abolished and then it just got reenacted. So it's basically not a non-factor now. Essentially, the decision that was made a couple months ago just got reversed. So I don't think it's going to be an impact now moving forward, thankfully, because that being abolished was something that I thought was going to be really problematic for a lot of businesses and a lot of innovation moving forward.
Great. And you had mentioned one question we have here is what is the name of the movie you said that our participants should watch?
Yep, the movie is called Her, H-E-R. And I'm just going to look it up. Scarlett Johansson actually is the voice behind the phone, which maybe explains why he fell in love with his phone. And there's another star in the movie. I think it might have even been Johnny Depp, but it's a very good movie. It came out a couple years ago, but it's something really that I think does a good job of painting the picture of where the world is going. Okay. Spike Jonze was the person that directed it. Joaquin Phoenix was the main star in the movie.
Okay. Another question we have here, what industry do you think is the most vulnerable position to losing its footing and being non-existent?
Well, I think it's more like the leaders in the industry will become non-existent versus the industry itself being non-existent. I think auto is one where I think you look at consumers buying less cars, you look at what Tesla's doing, you look at self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles. I think auto, a lot of the traditional auto companies are going to really find themselves, a lot of them almost went bankrupt in 2008. I think that they're not out of the woods yet, for sure. I think a lot of banks are in a lot of issues. You look at Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon are the most capitalized companies and have the most trust. Those used to be the case with banks. So I think traditional banks are really going to find themselves in big trouble moving forward. And I think a lot of the traditional packaged goods companies that make the everyday household items, again, are really going to be under threat. But it really is across the board. It's healthcare, it's education. There's so many industries really that are just beginning to feel the pinch. And then you have companies that have already been completely turned over, or industries rather, like music, which the music industry has changed forever, and it's never going back.
Great. And so just for everyone, we do have a variety of questions. We'll do the best we can to wrap some of these up. I would encourage you that if we don't get to your question, to specifically reach out to Matt. I think some questions are a bit broad that require perhaps some one-on-one interaction with Matt versus the whole group. Another question, do you think Gen Zers should focus more on making investments from a young age in stocks, crypto, forex trading, etc.?
Yes, I mean, I'm not a financial or wealth management advisor, but rule of thumb is there's no greater force than compounded interest. And I think if I were a young person, think about buying Apple stock versus buying an iPhone, so to speak. I can't speak to the long-term prognosis of crypto because, again, I think there's so many external factors. If I were somebody, I would invest in Apple or Amazon or Facebook or Google or Microsoft or a company like that, because I think those companies are going to continue to grow moving forward. And I think you really can't go wrong with having your money invested in companies like those.
Great. And so just a broad question on some of the trends that you shared. Do you specifically associate these just to kind of the U.S. market, or do you share your thoughts in the context of the global market as well?
So that's a great question. When I speak about this, I speak about the U.S., and I think any other correlation would be to another highly developed market, whether it be Australia or Western Europe. But I think obviously in places like Brazil or India or China, some of the South Korea, those emerging markets, I think there's a lot different drivers in those markets, and I'm frankly not an expert on those markets, so I can't speak to those with as much candor or confidence.
Sure, absolutely. So just probably a broad but very relevant question for some of our students. A lot of our students are freshmen and sophomore. Is there any particular advice you'd share with a current student in college now in terms of what they should really hone in on or focus in on in order to succeed post-graduation?
Yes, that's a great question. I put it in a couple of different categories. First of all, is the power of relationships and networks. I find right now, I'm 43 years old, and I just launched a new startup, a consumer intelligence software called Suzy, that, my ability to quickly grow and drive this new business is wholly dependent upon my network. And the people who I've known from my college days, actually just sold in a software license to somebody who was my college fraternity brother, right? And I kept that relationship going through the years. So, but now's where it all starts. Most people will tell you that their best networks are friends who they've met at college. And I think build that network, that's one. Two, find out what that niche is. I mean, that's not telling you anything you probably already heard, but carve out a niche on what you're doing. And it should be based upon something that you love. I mean, it doesn't mean that if you love sports that you're going to be the next LeBron James, but if that's really where your passion is and where you want to spend your time, figure out where the opportunities are in business there, because they're endless in places like sports where all the eyeballs are. So whatever that passion is, figure it out. And really try to hone a craft around that passion where you could really monetize it and do what you love, because you could always fall back and working for a big company and maybe not loving it, but now's the opportunity to really try to craft yourself. And part about that, and the last part, is build your personal brand. So invest time in creating content and pushing yourself out there and be known by people, not just in your immediate social circle, but out there. I can tell you, when I look to hire people, I will always research them. I'll always Google them. I'll always see what they're doing. And the people who take initiative, whether it's creating a blog or a vlog or a video or writing a thesis or anything, are the people who I'm most likely to hire, because if they're going to have initiative in their own lives, there's a good chance they're going to have initiative with my business.
Excellent. Final question, and thanks for everyone for the questions. Sorry we didn't get to them all.
Great questions.
Matt. Final question. The topics and categories in sales and products that you brought up seem to be promoting segregation in social classes. Any thoughts on this?
So I'm not promoting anything. All I'm doing is trying to reflect the state of society and the business opportunities that exist as a result. I think with every evolution, there's positives and negatives that come out of it. And the reality is, whether it's good or bad, we're not going backwards. So it's up to you to take advantage, if you want to build a business or be successful, of where things are going. I don't think gentrification is a good thing, but it's happening. I don't necessarily think urbanization is a good thing, or people staring at their phones all day is a good thing, or people worried about what other people think so they travel to places is a good thing. But it's how consumers are acting. So there's business opportunity within it. And if you want to build a nonprofit to try to, go counterculture, then you should go ahead and do that. I never try to come from a place of moral, ethical judgment, because I'm an expert in being able to do so. What I am an expert at is seeing where the world is going and telling you, if you want to ride the wave and take advantage of it for a business standpoint, this is where you need to be headed. And that's kind of how I approach things like that. But I totally respect other people's opinions in that regard. And again, I am no expert, in that area either.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Matt. We appreciate it. And, thanks for everyone for joining us. Be sure to chime in next week. We'll send out a link for you to register for next week's follow-up ScholarCAST with Matt, Wednesday, May 23rd. It's titled How to Leverage Millennial Disruptions to be a Disruptor. So taking what Matt said today and really looking at some things you can do. So thanks again for joining us. Again, we will send out the recording, and thank you, Matt.
Thank you.